I think when you go through such a big ordeal and you have such a change in appearance, like I did, and like I was thrust upon media, articles, people suddenly knew who I was because it was an injury that no one lives through, so everyone was intrigued by it and wowed by it. It was challenging because to start trying to accept a change of appearance when you haven't really accepted even what's happened in general, really you need to do that in your own time and in your own space, and as soon as you have any media attention, that's taken away. So it was hard, and I started seeing like any photos I would share on social media or that I would think would be shared with my family and friends only, that would then get printed in articles and stuff like that, and then you'd have to look at it. So I'd look at pictures of me before and me after next to each other, and it was already such a big thing to come to terms with, but to see it in print or online, it did make it harder. But in some ways it made me probably face it quicker than I ever would have. So I think there's probably pros and cons to that side of it. But I do think coming to terms with a change of appearance and a big ordeal and accident like I went through is easier when you can just do it in your own time. Luckily I came through it positively, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone. I always say that the accident that I went through, the injuries I've experienced, and the life-shattering experience I had, I always say that it changed me for the better. And lots of people don't really get that, or they say, really? Because now I'm covered in scars and my life is harder, I have disabilities I contend with every day. But before I had my accident, I truly didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't have like a passion or a goal or anything that drove me so massively as I do now. Because as soon as I woke up from my coma and I realised that I had this injury, obviously it took me a while to come to terms with it myself, but as soon as I did, I realised that then my whole world was going to be facing injustices because I looked different, I behaved differently because of the way my hands were, my eyes were, and that put me down about 5 steps behind everybody else instantly, just overnight, and I realised that I wanted to change that. So it was life-altering and life-changing, and if you ask my parents, they'd probably say they wish it hadn't happened, and I don't necessarily wish this had happened, but I do think it gave me meaning, and I think going through a life-altering accident, especially at 19 years old, where it's such formative years, I think although it was challenging, it really did shape my life completely and utterly, and it made me do, live and be the way I am today. Meeting people for the first time is probably one of the most challenging things because I always think it's a bit of an elephant in the room. If they don't have any background on me, or I don't know, like dating's a perfect example. Nowadays, you would meet them on a social media app, so they might have a bit of an idea of what you look like. But then sometimes you're in positions where you're at work events or out and about and you meet complete strangers who have never met you, and you know it's an elephant in the room that they want to ask questions about. And it is hard because I think, unfortunately, kind of makes you like condition first, person second, and that's not a way anyone wants to live. Like, I now am a physiotherapist, I work professionally, and I always try and introduce myself as that, but in the back of my mind I still jump to, and I'm a burn survivor, and that shouldn't be the case, but I feel like people have made me feel the need to explain myself. So yeah, it's hard, but when you wear a mark or a scar on your skin and it's visible for people to see, it's also hard not to be intrigued by it. It doesn't make it okay to ask any questions. It doesn't make it okay that is the norm, but at the moment it is the norm. So yeah, I've luckily come up with ways of dealing with it, approaching it, answering questions, but I have been fortunate enough to come through this quite strongly and positively. If I'd have been less confident, more reserved, and this had happened and people will ask me questions every day, I don't know how I'd cope, because it's reliving a trauma that was horrendous. I can close my eyes and I can see it. So when someone asks me a question or I have to explain it, it's like reliving that trauma all over again. And not just the trauma of the accident, the trauma of everything that came after it. So yeah, it's hard, but unfortunately, until there's a massive shift within everyone, that's not really going to change. So I just keep fighting to work towards making that massive shift. I think my main piece of advice for someone, either with a condition that they've always had with a visible difference, or if you have just acquired it, would definitely be that you're not on your own. When I acquired my scarring and ended up being a burn survivor, it was 10 years ago, and there was no one out there that I could look to see that looking like this was okay. Like, people would bring me magazines in hospital, and I remember flicking through them, and literally everything was about having perfect skin, looking perfect, being perfect. And I would lay there like, okay, well then I can't do that, so I don't really get where I fit. And no one was on TV really, no one was out there. I just couldn't find anyone to look to for a while. And I did feel really on my own. But like, the stats are crazy. I don't know the stats, but I know the stats show that there are millions of people who identify as having a visible difference, having a disability. They're out there. We're just not represented and they're not shown. So the idea that you're not on your own, you're not the only one out there living with these experiences and having to go through this, and look for those people. Social media is, although sometimes challenging, it is also a blessing in the sense that we can reach each other so much easier. People who are like us, people who are interested in the same things, but also people who have been through similar experiences. So go out there, look for people who you can look up to and you can ask questions to, and it will make you feel less alone, and it will make the journey a lot easier. I come across as very confident now, and I have been quite confident throughout the majority of my journey, having scarring and living with a visible difference. But even the most confident people have moments where they have felt like they wanted to hide, and they felt like they didn't want to go out and bear their scars. When I first left hospital and I went back to my hometown, I used to wear long-sleeved clothes, and I used to completely cover up because I didn't want to be asked questions, and I didn't feel ready to show the world my scarring. I think feeling like you need to hide that difference is so normal, and it's not fair because it's because of the way that society has made us feel about how we look and what that difference is. But it's really normal to feel that way, that you have to hide. But I think knowing that there's a possibility in the future where you may not feel like that, and you can build that confidence, and just having that knowledge that it might happen one day is powerful, and it is possible. I think I now bear my scars daily. I wear sleeveless tops, and I have my face on display, and I don't always wear makeup when I go out, and I do feel confident, and it's taken time and it's taken work, but it can happen. So we hide because people make us feel like we have to hide, but we are moving into an era where maybe that doesn't happen quite as much. And there are people out there who no longer hide, and we're trying to shout, and we're trying to make people feel like they can be themselves in whatever way they need to. When you live with a visible difference in today's society, we've been brought up around the whole idea that if you have scarring, particularly scarring, but any kind of condition, you're usually seen in media or in television and films as the bad guy. So I grew up thinking if you had a scar on your face that I should like run away or be nervous. I acquired my scarring at 19, so I've seen it from both sides of having a scar and not having a scar. So I think the knowledge that is truly what the world is like, and the knowledge that still hasn't changed, is so frustrating. As someone who has then acquired scars and then still has that connection of scarring equals bad, the importance of having positive role models is crazy. Like I think to not have someone to look up to makes the world so much harder to live in when you have a difference or a disability. Not seeing people out there who are strong, who are independent, who are like just the main guy in a film, it makes you feel like you're either not wanted or that you are like a side piece, and that's not right and it's not fair. It's always that they're the bad guy or you have an incredibly inspiring story, but there's actually just me and lots of other people with visible differences who have very regular lives and live very daily lives. They have families, they have regular jobs, and that is never represented. On days where I am finding getting out there with my scars on show challenging, I go one of two ways in terms of trying to move forwards and get out there. Sometimes, if I'm completely honest, I don't. I think it's okay sometimes to just say to yourself, I'm having a day and I actually need to take that day, and I actually can't be strong today. And it's only actually over the past few years that I've started doing that. I've realised that that's an okay side of the picture to have. I luckily don't have too many of those days, so it doesn't completely debilitate me by making me stay in for weeks at a time or anything like that. So the odd day, I may just say I can't be strong today, and actually I need to take a minute. When I do need to motivate myself and I have to get out, I try and remember why it's important for other people, more than anything, for me to take that step out of the door that day. I am very focused, and what does push me is trying to make change for others. And it never used to be a thing I really did, but since my accident, my focus has shifted to wanting to try and make changes to people with visible differences and disability by making society's views and opinions shift. So when I'm struggling, or I don't want to go out on those days where I'm down, or I don't want to bear my scars for people, I think about others and I think, why am I doing it? If I step out today and I have my scars out, because my scars, I can't hide all of them, I have scars on my hands, scars on my face, will that help others? Will that make other people see me? Will that then make that difference? And that's what will drive me if I don't feel I can do it. I found dating with a visible difference really challenging to start with. We live in a world, unfortunately, where people don't just like meet in a pub anymore or meet on a walk. You meet on dating sites where people judge you based on 4 to 6 photos and a couple of cheesy lines, like, and it's really hard when you have a visible difference to even share photos with strangers sometimes, never mind people who you ideally want to start dating or are looking for a romantic connection with. I think the reason I struggled with it to start with was actually because I hadn't fully accepted everything, and I wasn't really fully accepting of my own scarring. So I used to go out there looking for a romantic connection, but I didn't really love myself, so I used to actually think, why would anyone really want to go out with me when there's all these other people who don't have a visible difference? And it took me a while to actually even get past that. Over the past couple of years, I would say that's massively improved, and I have fully embraced who I am, what I look like, the scars I bear, and I now, and for the last few years, have managed to see them as a completely positive thing. So therefore, I can understand then why people would be interested. But that doesn't mean that dating has been easy. You do have the prejudice of knowing that people stop talking to you because of the way you look. You know people are swiping left literally straight away because of scarring, and it's not fair, but those people that do that aren't the people you want to be going out with anyway. If someone can have that much of a low opinion of somebody else, of, oh, I won't be interested in them because they have a scar, then you probably don't want to be going out with someone like that. I think that attitudes towards lots of minorities and people with differences, there has been a shift and a movement over the past 5 years towards becoming more accepting. My concern about that is that unless we keep pushing, there's not going to be an actual societal change. If we look at any kind of shift in people's perceptions and attitudes towards groups of people in the past, it takes not just 5 years, 10 years, it takes decades to actually properly make a change, because the people who become accepting are young people, and then as they grow and they have kids, then that's where you start having a fully accepting society. I think things are changing. I think there's a movement and a shift towards everyone just generally being more accepting of everything, but I worry that it's a bit of a trend at the moment, and that the inclusion of people with disabilities, visible differences, and then going into other groups like people of different sizes, of race, religion, everything. I think it's becoming more inclusive in brands and film and TV, but I just hope that everyone keeps the movement and the push moving forwards, and that it doesn't become a trend that everyone remembers in 10 years and go, well, wasn't it nice that we included all those people? Now let's get back to what we actually want to do, which is to include just skinny white people who have perfect skin. I think a movement takes time, and I think there's enough people pushing forwards and trying to make the movement of attitudes and perceptions of people with visible differences happen, but it's going to take a while. It is so important for people with visible differences to be seen and heard, and to not feel like they have to hide away.